I have sat on the board of governors of Aldermere Girls' School for 11 years, and in that time I have attended 8 end-of-term concerts. I know the rhythm of them, the program on cream card stock, the rows of proud parents in the assembly hall, the headmistress's introduction running 2 minutes longer than necessary. I know the smell of the place in June, floor polish and cut flowers, and I know the piano, a Bechstein grand position center stage beneath a window that lets in the last of the evening light. I had begun to regard those concerts as a reliable feature of the calendar, neither thrilling nor dreary, simply a duty performed in a comfortable chair. The evening I am describing was a Tuesday in early June, 6 years ago. I had come straight from chambers, and I settled into my usual seat in the third row, not too close, not too far, with my program folded in my lap. The hall was perhaps 2/3 full. Parents and governors, a handful of the older girls who were not performing, 2 members of the local education trust who had arrived with the headmistress and sat with her in the front row as though conferring a small honor on one another by their proximity. The headmistress was a woman named Patricia Vane. She had been at Aldermere for 4 years when this happened, and she ran the school with a kind of burnished efficiency that could, depending on the moment, resemble either confidence or something colder. She was not a cruel woman, I want to be clear about that. But she had a category for every student, a mental register she kept without realizing she kept it, and some girls entered that register early and could not easily leave it. I had observed this. I am a retired magistrate. Observing such things is a habit I never managed to shed. The scholarship students sat in 2 rows near the back of the audience before their slot. Aldermere had begun accepting music scholarship entrants 3 years prior, a county initiative, well-intentioned, not universally embraced by the school's longer-serving staff. The scholarship girls came from the state schools across the district, and they were placed in tutorials alongside the fee-paying students, but they ate at different times by accident of timetable, and they sat together out of the quiet solidarity of people who know when they are guests rather than residents. I noticed one of them because she arrived slightly late, slipping into the end of a row with a murmured apology to the girl beside her. She was perhaps 14 or 15, slight, with dark hair pulled back, wearing the school blazer that did not quite fit at the shoulders in the way of a garment that has been handed rather than bought. She held her program without opening it. I noticed that her hands were still, not the stillness of nerves, but the stillness of someone who has been still for a long time, who has learned not to fidget. Her name, I learned afterward, was Cora. She had come to Aldermere on a full county music scholarship 9 months before, transferred from a comprehensive on the east side of the city. Her tutorial teacher was a Mr. Fellows, who had written in the school's internal report. I read this later, because by then I felt I needed to understand the full sequence of events, that the girl was technically capable but resistant to guidance, and unlikely to advance beyond a competent intermediate level. I have read many such reports in my time. I know what resistant to guidance means when applied to a child who is simply better at something than the person assessing her. Mrs. Vane spoke her introductions from a small lectern to the left of the stage. She welcomed the parents, acknowledged the trust representatives, praised the term's work. Then she arrived at what she called the school's new tradition of closing each concert with a piece from one of the scholarship students. Cora has offered to play for us this evening, she said, and I noticed the phrasing. Offered. As though the girl had raised her hand and asked for the privilege. She'll give us something short and simple to close on. She turned from the lectern, and I saw her glance at the front row, at one of the trust representatives in particular, a man named Aldous Fothergill who funded a portion of the scholarship program and had, I suspected, expressed some skepticism about its results at a recent governor's meeting I had not attended. The glance lasted perhaps a second. It was the glance of someone managing expectations. Something short and simple. Don't worry. Nothing to alarm you. There was a small ripple of polite applause. A few parents in the rows around me shifted in their chairs with the particular movement of people who are already thinking about the car park. Cora stood and walked to the stage with the unhurried step of someone who had somewhere specific to be. She was not nervous, or if she was, it sat deep below the surface. She wore flat shoes. She adjusted the bench with a single quarter turn of the knob, settled herself, and placed her hands in her lap for a moment, not on the keys. She looked at the piano, not the audience. The assembly hall had the low murmur of a room that is not yet paying attention. Then she placed her hands on the keys and played the first chord of Scriabin's Etude in D-sharp minor, Opus 8, number 12. I did not know what it was. I want to say that clearly. I am not a musician. I spent 36 years in criminal law and I have a passing familiarity with Elgar and with Handel's Messiah because my wife loved it, and that is approximately the extent of my musical education. What I know is this: the sound that came out of that piano was not what the room was braced for. It was not a short and simple anything. The etude opened with a single thundering statement in the bass, a chord of such weight and certainty that I felt it in the seat beneath me, and then the right hand began. Octaves, surging upward in great muscular waves, the left hand driving underneath with a rhythm so relentless it seemed to alter the air pressure in the room. There was nothing tentative about it. There was no apologetic warming up, no gentle approach. She played from the first note as though she had been waiting to play it for a long time, and the waiting was now entirely over. The murmuring stopped. I could tell you the precise moment, though I have no musical vocabulary for it. It was perhaps 6 seconds into the piece. The man to my left, who had been speaking quietly to his wife, stopped in the middle of a word. The word simply ceased. I heard it happen, the small click of a sentence cut off at the root, and then there was nothing in the assembly hall but the piano. She played with her whole body, and yet without extravagance. What I mean is that she was not performing the playing of it, she was simply playing, and her body was part of how the music moved. The octave runs in the right hand were not merely loud, they had shape and direction, they built toward something, crested, and then she drove them higher, and the Bechstein took it all with the sound of an instrument that had perhaps been waiting for someone to ask this much of it. The left hand never faltered. The jumps, wide, sudden, landing without hesitation, came with the certainty of someone who has practiced a thing until it no longer requires thinking. I looked at Patricia Vane. She was in the front row, 7 feet from where the girl sat playing, and she had turned slightly in her chair. Her hands, which had been folded in her lap a moment before, were now flat against her knees. Her face had a quality I had seen on faces in court, the expression of a person receiving information that contradicts something they believe to be settled. It was not quite discomfort. It was not quite admiration. It was the suspended look of someone whose categories have momentarily failed them. Aldous Fothergill, beside her, was very still. The music built toward its central surge. There is a section in that etude where the two hands seem to be doing battle, the right hand's octaves hammering upward while the bass drives forward with controlled fury, and the whole thing accumulates until the room around it cannot quite contain it, and I became aware, in a dim peripheral way, that several people near me had stopped breathing. I do not mean this as a figure of speech. I was conscious, for the first time in as long as I can remember, of the fact that I myself was holding my breath, and that it had not occurred to me to draw another one because that would mean unclenching something that the music had gripped very tightly. Near the back of the hall, one of the scholarship girls was crying quietly. Her neighbor had put an arm around her, the small lateral lean of a friend, and neither of them was looking at the stage. They were simply listening, heads slightly bowed, the way people listen to something they have been waiting a long time for someone else to hear. The etude's final pages came, the right hand releasing the octaves, the texture thinning, and then a long descending line that ended in silence. Not the silence of a piece trailing off. The silence of a door closing firmly, from the inside. For a moment, no one moved. Then they were on their feet. Not in the polite, rolling way of concert audiences. All at once, as though the motion had been pre-agreed. The man to my left was standing before I understood that I was standing too, and the applause when it came was not the restrained, programmatic clapping of the earlier pieces, it was the other kind. The kind that sounds like relief. Cora sat quite still at the piano, hands in her lap, looking down at the keys. She did not stand immediately. She waited, in the way she had waited at the beginning, with a quality that was not humility and not pride but something more solid than either. When she finally stood and turned to face the room, there were tears on her face. She did not wipe them. She accepted the applause for perhaps 5 seconds, then gave a small, composed bow. Patricia Vane was clapping. She was the last person in the front row to stand, and when she did, she clapped with the careful deliberateness of someone reconstructing a thing from first principles, not automatic, not performed. She stood and she looked at the girl and she clapped, and whatever she was thinking, she kept it internal. I saw Aldous Fothergill lean toward her and say something into her ear. She nodded once. That was all. I spoke to Mr. Fellows briefly in the hallway afterward, while the parents collected their children and the evening dispersed. He is not a bad man, Fellows, an anxious teacher, more attuned to the limitations of his own methods than he would ever admit. I asked him about the etude, because I still did not know what I had heard. Scriabin, he said. He looked slightly reduced, the way people look when something they assessed incorrectly has been corrected in front of others. She's been working on it since October. Alone? I asked. He paused. She showed it to me in November. I told her it was too advanced for her current stage. I did not say anything to that. 36 years in the law teaches you when not to speak. I passed Cora in the corridor as I was leaving. She was carrying a small bag and walking with one of the other scholarship girls, the two of them speaking in low voices the way close friends speak when they have just witnessed something together and are still inside it. She looked younger than she had on the stage, ordinary, simply a girl with two big blazer sleeves and a long walk home. I said, as she passed, that she had played beautifully. She stopped. She looked at me with an expression that was difficult to read, not surprised, exactly, but considering. As though she was deciding whether to spend anything on the remark. "Thank you," she said. She held my gaze for a second longer than most 14-year-olds would, and then she and her friend went on down the corridor and out through the double doors into the evening. I went back to my car. I sat there for a minute before starting the engine, the program still folded in my hand. There is a thing about music I had never understood before that night, and I am not certain I fully understand it now. But I think what I heard in that assembly hall was not simply a piece played well. What I heard was a person who knew, with complete certainty, what she was capable of, and who had sat quietly in the back rows of a room that had not yet known it, and waited, and then shown them. Some rooms take a long time to hear what has always been in them. I was glad to be in that one when it finally did.